Hi everyone, Byron White here. Pleasure to be chatting with everyone. Well, I guess with Jeff and Andrea. Jeff and Andrea, welcome. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing great.
Right on. See, that was right in sync. You guys are already synced up perfectly.
Very agile.
Very agile. Boom. So yeah, I'm going to suggest that I just ask you guys a few questions before we begin. And I'm going to walk through first a couple of formalities here while everybody's sort of diving into this and loading in. For starters, I always get this question about 5 minutes in for anybody that's coming in late. Well, is there a recording of this webinar? And the answer is yes. In fact, there's a recording of the webinar along with 75 others that we've done over the last gajillion years, and those are all available over on Writer Access, so you can dive in. Everyone who's here, and even if you didn't make it but registered, you'll get an email from us with a recording to all the slides. We're going to try to leave 15 minutes for Q&A, and if you could, I would love it if you would post your questions throughout the webinar, and I will circle back at the end of the webinar and start diving into your questions and surfacing with some answers from Jeff and Andrea. And of course, if you tweet the love to us, that would be fantastic with the hashtag #RightOn. That would be fabulous. So let me see if I can launch this poll in a second. For those of you, everybody knows me. Let's just move right along past me. But I am super excited and pumped about Content Marketing Conference, if I could put a shameless plug-in for that. We're ramped up. We're way ahead of our tracking with where we were last year. We expect double the number of attendees, and we have some absolutely rock star speakers, 30 speakers this year, 4 keynotes. Very exciting, incredible content, very tactical hacks, really things you can put to work quickly. We've worked really hard in preparing an incredible agenda this year. It's going to be packed with lots of surprises, including, I might add, some musical entertainment on the stage, tied into a very interesting discussion we're going to have about artists and how they're fitting in and aligning their personal brands with larger brands. So there's a teaser for you for something new and fresh and different that we've baked up this year that really should wow. So super excited about that. But enough about me and the conference. Let's here, we're going to pop up the poll question. Kelly's on the line. And Kelly can pop up a poll question. Thank you. That would be really great. If we could get everyone to answer this question that's listening in and tuned in right now, that would be super awesome. We want to try to look at this data carefully and gear our presentation accordingly with some of these answers that we'll read the answers of. But let me take this minute to hear from Andrea. Andrea, tell me a little bit about your company, Survey Gizmo, and what is value proposition, how it makes the world better.
Well, Survey Gizmo is basically out to make it super simple for organizations of all sizes and types to collect data, to collect feedback, and then to use that to drive decision making in their organization. So from surveys to polls to quizzes, like the great poll that we're all taking right now, we make it as easy as possible for people to use that. And then we also have Marketer Gizmo, which is a purely content-driven site where we are hoping to help marketers have a little bit more fun and do a little bit better job in their day-to-day work. It's all sort of written for marketers, by marketers, helping solve one another's problems.
Tell us about your background in just a minute or so on Agile. Why did you choose to go so deep that you have? And by the way, you're running a workshop with Jeff on Agile, so super pumped and excited about that. You guys are really going to offer some fabulous content, I know. But why Agile? So many different choices in marketing. Why was Agile interesting to you?
Well, I was doing some research on a marketing plan article, and I just couldn't bring myself to recommend that people actually make these huge documents that plan multiple years ahead. And I thought a much better approach is the way that our development team was running, which was in 2-week sprints. And so I Googled Agile marketing in the hope that somebody else had figured out how to do this, and people were just starting to sort of figure it out, and so I jumped in head first and have been completely hooked ever since, and I don't think I can ever go back to non-Agile marketing ever again. It's just, it's helped me so much as a content creator, and I've seen what it's done for our team, so I really want to help other people make that transition and start to get those benefits.
Good stuff. Jeff, over to you. Tell us about your company. Start with that, maybe.
Sure. So AG is an agency. We help our clients with large content management systems, web design, pretty much the works. We're very technical, but we also speak marketing. And so it's kind of the background of the company. And for me, I started out as a software developer. I've been using Agile for nearly 15 years now. And so the transition to marketing started when I launched an online community. And we created blog posts consistently, 50 a day with our 4,000 bloggers. And you have to have a tool better than an editorial calendar. And so we leveraged, Agile, because that's what we knew.
Why do you think Agile is potentially secret sauce for the marketing world as we know it?
For me, I believe it's something that will set you apart, because the whole concept of it is to remove anything that could cause delay, that could cause discrepancies, and allows you to focus on the audience. So with other tools, with tools from the past, they were adopted for specific, time, such as the editorial calendar when you were pushing out monthly magazines. But now, when everything could release, at different schedules, at different paces, we need a different tool that can adapt to the modern digital marketing effort and not necessarily what we used to do.
Very cool. I bet the poll results then. Anybody want to take a guess along with what the biggest obstacle was? Unless you guys are cheating and seeing the results here, but what would you guess? Can you guys see it, Andrea? Can you see the results or not? Don't cheat. Don't go to the poll results. I want you to guess.
No, I haven't seen them. My guess is
all right.
My guess is the executive buy-in.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Okay. The number one was education expertise. Oh, sorry, I'll take that back. The number one was lack of time or commitment in marketing. That was number one. Number two, educating expertise of team members, which is what you're going to help out with today, hopefully.
Yeah, tons of help there.
Number three, by a close shot, was internal and external measurement. And the fourth was getting leadership buy-in. And the last one was maintaining a consistent publication schedule. Very interesting.
I could see that. I mean, I think we come from the perspective where we've kind of answered some of those first questions, and then once you get to that point, it's, okay, now we got to get other people to buy in on the stuff that we're doing.
Totally. I'm going to change presenters and turn things over here. Give me 1 second. And boom, over to you, Andrea. But let's let you guys take the reins and off we go.
All right, let me get this started up here. We need to switch screens. There we go. Okay, so as Byron said, we are talking Agile marketing today, and this is us. You don't need to see us again. We already talked about ourselves. But this is what we're going to try to cover today. Our goals are really to get beyond the sort of flowery theoretical foundations of capital A agility and what Agile means. We'll touch on those really briefly for those who aren't familiar, but our real hope is that we can talk more about what Agile looks like in real life and what it looks like for your team. So as part of that discussion, we want to talk about how content marketing has changed the way that we do marketing overall and the benefits of doing that. And, we, of course, all love our content, but it doesn't come without its own challenges. And Jeff and I really think that Agile offers a lot of solutions to the challenges that we were just talking about that come along with running a successful content initiative. So we want to look at what those solutions look like, and we'll close up with some best practices on how you can actually put those to work. So tools, easy ways to get started, and some effective ways to track ROI for your Agile projects. So let's get started. This is sort of my own personal belief here that Agile plus content marketing is a great combination. Peanut butter and chocolate go together really well, so do Agile and content, but it doesn't always work out perfectly in the beginning. So we're going to take a look
I just got a nice t-shirt idea thanks to your first slide.
Maybe we can hand those out at the workshop.
There you go.
So we'll take a look first here at content marketing, and this is not a secret. Content marketing has been a game changer, and it's changed the way that we communicate with our audiences. It's changed the way that we run our departments, and it's been making some big waves. But before we talk about some of the pitfalls, let's make sure that we're all on the same page, because I saw a great article this morning trying to differentiate content strategy, content marketing, and content marketing strategy. So I think there's still a little bit of confusion around what we actually mean when we say content marketing. So what we mean today, at least, is that content marketing is focused on really building an audience. You want a large, loyal audience that you can build up steadily over time. You probably have secondary goals around this, like getting leads and making sales, but really the big picture needs to be to create a community that is centered around your content. And of course, this is not a short-term play. You need to be in it for the long haul if you really want to see success. 6 months is kind of the minimum threshold, but if you can get into it for a year or more, then you're probably going to see a lot better results. And just as the focus is on building an audience, content marketing is really centered around providing value to that audience instead of focusing exclusively on trying to get them to do something for you. So it's really a trade-off. You give them valuable content, they become loyal to your brand, they become a valuable member of your audience, and then maybe eventually they'll take a valuable action for your business. And this is often where people have trouble, because especially as the audience grows, it becomes really tempting to ask them for stuff too soon, and that can be a big danger. Okay, so we can't get those first three done without releasing content regularly. Whatever regularly might mean for your particular team or department can vary, but you need to figure out what your cadence is and stick to it. And again, this can be really challenging because other things are always cropping up. But once you start skipping publication dates and missing your targeted releases, then things can become sketchy for your audience. They don't trust that you're going to do what you said. Let's see. And finally, you need to be able to leverage several channels. You don't want to, the phrase is, don't build on borrowed land. You don't want to rely on a social channel that you don't control, but you do need to be prepared to promote and distribute your content across several channels. All right, content marketing, all good. And this is sort of why we go to the trouble to do all of that. It's a lot of work, and it definitely takes up a lot of time and effort, but it's worth it. As you can see here, 60% of marketers are doing this every single day, and the benefits are, there are tons, but here are just a couple. You get 7.8 times higher unique traffic to your website on a year-over-year basis, and 70% of CMOs will tell you that this is the future of marketing. This is the way to go forward. And it costs 62% less than other traditional forms of marketing while still generating 3 times the leads. So this is the way to do it. However, there are not, it's not without its issues. executives look at those sort of numbers that we just saw, and they start demanding more content, more and more. Write all the things, do it right now, go out and get me those results. But if you show those numbers to some content teams, they might feel a little bit like this. We get tired. It's really, really difficult to do this effectively over time in a traditional marketing team. We do it more, and we run out of steam. And there are more and more problems that start cropping up. Schedules are tough. It's really difficult to maintain that consistent cadence like we talked about. There are ruptures in the schedule, content creators burn out, your individual marketers become super stressed out. You're trying to keep up with deadlines, and meanwhile people are running up to us asking us to edit things, write my email, help me with this sales collateral, and we're still trying to meet those lofty goals of adding value to our audience. So we have a lot of things vying for our attention. And then
I can relate to the whole stress piece. Just this week, my doctor told me my blood pressure is near having to go to the emergency room pace, and he goes, "What's could be causing that?" I'm like, "Well, I'm a marketer, and I create a lot of content, right? It's hard to do this, and especially over time, over years and decades, to hit that schedule. The pacing is impossible."
And then when you get up against those deadlines, you stop focusing on your strategy. You're just trying to hit your publication dates and feed the content monster, and you don't have time to stop and look around. And then you come up against inconsistencies. Your content's not always meeting the same goals, and your ROI can be threatened because you're not focused on your goals. You lose focus on your audience, and then it starts to look like your content is unsuccessful. So you may have pressure to abandon it, or you may have a competitor who starts doing it better than you, and then the benefits that we looked at before are no longer clear, and this is where people end up abandoning content marketing too quickly. So, it will be fun, they said, and then you end up like Jeff here, where you have high blood pressure and you're falling asleep on your keyboard. It's not a pretty picture when this sort of thing happens. So how do we get back to all those great stats that we saw about the traffic and the leads and the ROI that's available? Can we ever get there, or is this just a pipe dream that we're not going to achieve? How do we make them a reality? Well, Jeff is going to jump in here and talk to us about how Agile can help us do that.
Sure. So, as a content marketer for a long period of time, it's definitely something that I sensed early, that the pacing, the ability to listen into the audience and the industry was very difficult. Things change so rapidly. Just right now, my business partner is, at Microsoft's conference, sitting through a HoloLens session. We bought one. It'll show up here next week because we've got to prep for VR. Because guess what? You're not going to read text when you have a virtual reality heads-up display on. So how is content going to react to that? These are all questions that we have to ask. And then also, what does our audience look for today? Where are they at during their days? What kind of types of education are they looking for? And so as these ideas start bubbling up, we kind of get this, grumpy cat look on our face when we get a request in to say, well, I don't know if I can do that, instead of taking it on and saying, heck yeah, I can do that. And so we need to find a process that can allow us to have that pacing that slows us down, but then also reach that audience, hit them with what they want, and get the business the goals that they're looking for. And so what Agile Marketing does is it puts a process around the planning of your content marketing or your marketing effort, and also the execution of the creation of content. And so those are the solutions we're going to look at today. Some of the rules that come into play, you'll see these over time, right? You'll have an improvement in team morale, which is great because we all want to see a smile on our faces, and increased productivity, right? Which doesn't necessarily mean speed. It could just mean better quality. But we see an increase in our productivity. The projects are far more visible. And this is where the buy-in usually comes in, because most marketing teams take random requests from people, right? They're the short order cooks of the business world. I need a new something. And with the visibility into the current workload, you can make those efforts known. I know when I visited Andrea at her office, it's all out there in the open. Andrea, why don't you tell them about your setup?
Yeah, we have our editorial calendar out where everyone can see it. We have a Kanban board that shows what we're working on right now and what we've completed in our last sprint, as well as what's in our prioritized backlog that we're planning to tackle next. And everybody in the organization can see that. So when they come over and things into our laps, we can say, hey, that's great, but what do you want to bump out of our current list of things that we're working on so that we can take what you have just given us. It really lets us show the impact of those sort of short order cook type requests and how they are affecting our overall output.
Yeah, exactly. But then, just like I said, we still will be those short order cooks, and so we need the ability to change and to bring those other pieces of content in when needed. So that's why I love the open and exposed paper boards, and then digital systems too. They still help. But, that's great and all, but whenever you do research on Agile marketing, or I do research on Agile marketing, I get the super geeky tech version of what it is because, well, Agile comes from super geeky tech people like me, where we like to use several three-letter acronyms and, talk about, very legalese style language. And then you look at the next guy and he says, hey, it's all about fast. It's fast. Agile means, it's like a football player. You can run around somebody and score a goal real quick. But the list just keeps going on and on and on what it is. And, by its very definition, it is an open and adaptable process. So to put a true, honest definition on it is very difficult. So we have to look at it more in chunks and the purpose behind it as the definition, and then allow you to incorporate the way you're going to adopt it into your own definition of Agile marketing. So one of the main areas that we focus on is working in small experiments. So let's not say we're going to go out and do this giant campaign where we're going to spend months and months planning for it and then start rolling it out over time. Let's take some time to plan, but then let's start producing content and then adapt and move. And because we're releasing on these regular increments, we can come up for air, we can look at our measurements, we can ask questions, we can change the priority of things, and we can go back in and start to create more. And then during that whole process, we should be learning more about ourselves, our teams, the silos we all live in. So if I'm very proficient at writing, but I'm not very good at graphics design, and we only have one graphics designer, maybe that's an area I should pick up. So continue my education, and then also learning more about how much we can produce at a sustainable pace. For us, failure is an option because whether or not we test, if we're always throwing sevens, that's great, but we need to know how we're supposed to respond when things change. So if we do fail, we learn from those mistakes, we make adjustments, and we go forward.
Jeff, question for you right here on this gorgeous slide you have. From an intellectual perspective, I guess, gorgeousness. But if you can imagine Agile is sort of like a haiku, right? And what one or two rules from this slide would you suggest are a must-have definitive part of Agile marketing?
For me, it has to be the focus on the customer. because if we fail at that, which most marketing efforts do, they're focused on the business, they're focused on the individual marketer and what they want to do, but not necessarily their customer, their audience. Without that, it all starts to crumble. You can do it effectively, but you're not doing it for the right reason. That's mine. What do you think, Andrea?
You know, I like the last one where it talks about Agile as a way of doing business. People get really caught up on the methodologies and the nuts and bolts day in, day out. You know, I have to do this particular meeting, or I have to use this particular type of board. But really, it's an approach. It's a way to look at how you run your team and how you communicate with your customer. And if you're doing that, if you are using sort of Agile principles to do that, then I think you're going to be successful.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no problem. And then, so yeah, we've covered all the other areas, kind of like you change, and like we said, we focus on that customer. But the Agile process in general just kind of, it's like an arm around your marketing effort. And it wants to kind of incorporate new ways of tweaking performance, to focus on different areas, to allow for your team to adapt and grow. And so it applies a rule set that starts to break down some of the other rule sets that you're used to. But that's great and all, right? But at the end, we're still tired, and you just added more stuff to me. And I hear it often. It's like, seriously, there's like 6 or 7 types of meetings in an Agile process? And it's like, well, there can be, and there should be, but it gets rid of all the other meetings, or it gets rid of all the other confusion. But it's still like, it's so tiring. I don't want to do this. So Andrea is going to tell us a little bit more about how we can get out of that tired syndrome and actually start to embrace this process.
Right, so it can be very helpful to have a pilot program where you do this on a small scale and prove the value first. And we'll show you a couple of examples that work pretty well to do that. And then you can use that data that you collect to build your very first sprint on your team once you have a little more buy-in. And you should probably adopt a couple of tools. You may not need any, depending on the size of your team, and we'll talk about that as well. But you also need to set everything up from day one and whatever pilot you choose to be able to measure your ROI. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that really means. But for the pilot program, you're always going to have people on your team who are not convinced by the hypothetical stats that we talked about before. Someday after we've been Agile for 2 years, we'll get this amazing team morale and we'll get this amazing visibility. They want proof right now that it's going to deliver results for your team. So to satisfy those people, you need to go out and collect some data, which will hopefully always be in your favor. But this is an Agile approach, right? You jump in, you learn stuff, you bring back data, and then you iterate on the process. And you're only failing if you didn't learn anything. So a pilot program should be a way to create an experiment that you probably wouldn't have been able to try outside of an Agile approach. You can also look for options for low-risk innovations that you can test out within particular tactics. And what I mean by that, content marketing is a really good option for a pilot because you can test out ebook topics, you can test out blog categories. It's really pretty low risk to put out a particular type of content or content on a particular topic and then see what actually resonates with your audience. The guys from Workfront, I don't know if anyone's familiar with their software, but I saw them do a presentation and they showed literally a dozen different versions of an ebook about being more productive on a marketing team, and they literally sent them all out to their audience, and then they saw which ones got shared and which ones got downloaded the most, and those were the versions that they continued with. And they had them all planned out, so they knew what the next steps were depending on which ones were most successful. But that was a very agile way to figure out what content their audience was actually interested in. And social media offers you such instant feedback that you can gather data really quickly and iterate very rapidly on the types of, even the types of phrasing or the types of hashtags or anything like that, down to the kinds of content that you're sharing. Email nurture campaigns work really well too, because it's typically in most market automation software very easy to set up A/B split tests, gather the quickly, especially if you have a large list, and then learn and iterate and adapt very rapidly so that you can prove the value of using this Agile approach to your team. And similarly, if you have a new vertical or an audience segment that you want to try out, the risk is pretty low because you're not marketing to them right now. So you can use your Agile pilot program to start experimenting with what might work or investigating what audience segments are going to be the most valuable. And then you'll have data to take back and share with your team.
Yeah, and I love this last one because it allows you to start with that audience and focus in on what makes them unique, and then also the ways they like to consume content, which everybody's different, and the more demographics you add to that persona, the more kind of tailored you can make that content.
And so one of the ways that you can do this is in sprints. This is based on the Scrum methodology, and this tends to be kind of the default approach that people use, but it's by no means the only option. There's a lot going on here, but basically you have a prioritized backlog, which is like your big to-do list, and then your team pulls down tasks that they think they can accomplish within a given amount of time, and that would be your sprint length. People tend to do 2 weeks, give or take, and then you get started. And then every day your team meets to talk about what they did yesterday, what they plan to do today, and any blocks that are in their way. And then hopefully by the end of your sprint length, you have this nice big list of completed tasks. So this is obviously a very quick and dirty overview of Scrum, and Jeff and I are doing an entire 4-hour workshop on implementing this on your marketing team. So there's a lot more to say here.
And 4 hours is definitely aggressive. We usually take a day or two.
Yeah. But this is a really good way to implement those pilot programs to create structure around them. And like I said, these are kind of the individual components of using Scrum for Agile marketing. And the first one was not on that diagram that we just showed, but quarterly planning is sort of like marketing's version of release planning for software. So you're looking at a fairly large chunk of time and breaking it down into smaller and smaller pieces. So it goes from a big sort of quarterly strategy all the way down to tasks that your individual team members are going to be working on. And the last 3 points here were not really on that diagram either, but at the end of your sprint, you need to take time to show what your team achieved. And a retrospective is a meeting where your team talks about how things went from a process perspective. So this might be, we need to change the time of our stand-up, or it's really hard for our team members who are working remotely to connect, and we need to find a better way to get them involved. That's another crucial part of the process. And finally, supportive higher-ups. So even if you're in the pilot program phase, you're going to have a little bit of support. Otherwise, you'll have the people running over all the time and demanding that you abandon your sprint objectives in favor of what they want you to work on. So even if you don't have total buy-in, you need to try to create a little bit of space for your team as early as you can. And the best way to run your first sprint, in my opinion, is get your backlog in place, so your prioritized list of things you need to work on, start having daily stand-ups, and make sure that you do a retrospective at the end where you can talk about what worked and what didn't and what you could do better next time. You can work on getting all the other sort of nuts and bolts pieces in place as you go along, but if you get these few key components started, you're setting yourself up for success. What do you think, Jeff? Do you think that that's enough to get started?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where you need to go, is to start small. Don't try to eat the whole elephant at once. Do that 1 week sprint where you have enough, planning to get you through a week, and then you start to work out those diversion techniques to hide from people while you're focused working, and then prioritizing that backlog and then saying, hey, what's working and not working, but also reach out and get help. When you try to do it on your own, when you don't have any practice or experience with it, it can be very daunting because there are a lot of steps that are simple, but they do help when they're put into place. So look at some agile coaching or some advisory.
Or come to a workshop, kind of like ours.
Or come to a workshop. So the tools that we're going to need to do this, they range from paper-based to digital. Some of the characteristics of a good tool is it creates visibility to what your backlog is. That's from the internal team itself, so the people who are creating the content, the person who's owning that backlog, and then also whoever's managing the sprint process. We call them Scrum Masters in the Scrum framework. And then also any external people who are looking at this as an experiment. Show them what's going on. So this is where, for new teams, starting with paper, using white pieces of paper to represent your content backlog items, using yellow Post-it notes from 3M to represent your task, and having 3 columns up on a board that says, this is what I plan to work on for the whole thing, and in the middle, this is what we're working on today, and then on the right, here's what's done. And during that daily stand-up meeting, we're unsticking it, and we're sticking it down in the column that it needs to be in, and you see the visibility. And the purpose of that, and this is where Agile started, was to reduce the need for these monster Gantt charts and project management systems and just all this overhead that went into preparing for a project. In fact, in my house, I have a Scrum board in my kitchen. My wife is a Scrum Master for us, and so our kids understand Agile, and we do Scrum for pretty much everything that requires planning. So if we go on a vacation, we sit down and we write out backlog items like pack, prepare the car, go get food, and then different days during the vacation that will represent those cards. And then we break out those tasks like, okay, I've got to pack the kids, and I've got to charge the iPads, and I've got to have all this stuff, and it all becomes tasks. And then during that daily stand-up before we head out to the vacation, we start moving cards over, saying, today we're working on this, and you're doing this, and hey kids, you got to go get your clothes so we can wash them. Where are your swim trunks at, right? Things like that all sit up there. But as you can see, it meets the unique need by using the exact same process. So if you're making a cake, if you're working on a content marketing effort, if you're writing the next version of Windows, the process still works. And the tool should be able to work as well. And then the whole team needs to be able to see it and access it. So you can go with digital systems or paper-based systems. But the things you probably don't need, and really never need, is anything that increases the time for project management. And the one caveat there is, I've seen a lot of marketing teams that don't actually do project management. They just go forward, right? What are we working on today? And so if you see an increase there because you're finally planning or you're actually writing out your content marketing strategy and your plan, then yes, absolutely increase time there. But it shouldn't overcomplicate the process. You shouldn't have the Bob and Bob reports and TPSs all over the place, right? Or, have to fill out a form for everything you do to pass it off to somebody else. It should be pretty seamless. And you don't want a steep learning curve. And even though we are suggesting that you come to a workshop or find some education, grab a book, whatever it is, you're going to have to spend some time up front to learn it, but it shouldn't be like I have to take a class at the master's degree level to learn this, or I shouldn't refer to it as a black belt in anything, because it should be a green belt for everyone to learn this process. And we don't want it.
You should spend your time learning. Spend your time learning the Agile process and not the tool.
Yeah, exactly. And then you don't want that tool to eat up your entire annual budget. And we've all seen this, with the MarTech diagrams that are out there, that they'll put the word enterprise on it, and that automatically means it adds a 0 to the end of the monthly fee. Does it gain much more functionality? No, it gains a few users, but for most of us on smaller marketing teams, and even large marketing teams, that's a big chunk that we didn't prepare for. But we need a tool now. So Agile Tools should probably fit in there. Here's some great vendors. The one we use is Jira. It is very open. It allows for you to be completely flexible, but at the same time it does add a lot of complexities into it. So if you're getting started, it may not be the right tool for you. Maybe a Trello is. And a Trello is just kind of like this task system that has swim lanes, and you define whatever you want to and make it work and fit in there. And then some of these other vendors, they're trying to produce something specific for marketing that fits, Rally's more general, but Workfront and Reich are trying to produce a tool that is dedicated for Agile marketing. And so they have some new offerings there. Which ones do you like?
Yeah, we use Trello and Reich over here, but you can't go wrong with a good old whiteboard and stickies if you just want to get started quickly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I still revert back, to stickies. I've got Post-it notes all over the wall right behind me because that's just my preferred method.
I know, we're actually going back to a physical board. We're trying it for our next sprint just because we haven't really tried that too dedicated. We haven't been dedicated to it, so we're going to give it a try. So we'll see how that goes.
And then the main side of
it. Question on that. Thank you. Andrea, is that because you haven't had success with product management tools like you just showed, or are you going to use both?
We will still have to do some of our planning in the software tools, and myself and the other content creators have a content software tool that we use, but for pure visibility purposes, we're trying it out, so it's going to be like out in the shared common area for the whole organization. We're hoping that it creates more visibility around what we're working on, because people are going to be walking past it, and we're going to have a little triage and sort of box where people can put things that they want us to consider working on right away, and then we as a team can incorporate those. So really it's about visibility for the rest of the organization.
Got it. Which software are you using with your team? Was it Workforce or?
We are using Trello and Reich a little bit right now.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, and so for us, we use Jira because we've been doing this for so long, and we do it on the software and the content side. So we have a giant touchscreen television that people can walk up to and load up their boards, and then use their fingers to drag their cards across. So we wanted to recreate the feel of paper, but also not have that process where you have to actually go and take what happened on paper and put it into a system. We wanted to make that all become one. And so that's
And what are they popping up? Like storyboards or updates on sprints? Is it, or content assets or sketches or drafts, or how crazy are you getting?
Yeah,
what
so
kind of projects are they all content related projects?
They're all backlog and task related. So it could be whatever we're creating. It could be an article, a video, a podcast, and in those each one of those items are broken down into smaller tasks that have to be done to make this thing complete. So on the board we have those items that we've committed to during this increment, this time, this 2-week period or 1-week period. And for that time, we sit down and we isolate ourselves from everything else, and we say we're going to work on these items. So that board shows everything on the left needs to be done, everything on the right is done, and everything in the middle is what we're working on.
Got it. And that's for one isolated project without any distractions, hyper-focus.
Hyper-focus, but you can section your day out. So if you are across several projects, but it's not necessarily projects, it's more audience, right? Because you and I, we both talk to marketers, and we talk to marketers with several different pieces of content. These webinars, your podcasts, blog posts, and all that stuff. There's no reason to section those out into their own realms because we're working on them all. We should section it out based off of the audience that we're working with.
Got it. And is that exactly what you do? So you have different sprints. How many sprints, the simultaneous sprints are running at one time?
So at our office, we have 10 running usually, and that's software and content, and then integrated with our clients and the agency side. So we help our clients kind of organize their process, and we all circle around there. So we have 2 Scrum Masters that manage all that. And then customer experience people that help with the communication and the understanding of the backlog and all that stuff.
Sounds wonderfully complex, yet brilliantly simple.
Exactly.
Perhaps that summarizes Agile marketing in 4 words.
Yeah. And it's funny, I get asked the question often, like, what makes a good Scrum Master? And I say, well, let's look at their parenting skills. So if you have a good mom on your team that has really good kids, she's probably a good Scrum Master because she understands what to look for, the nuances, and then how to do that corrective measure, but still be like loving at the same time. And it really brings back the emotions into managing your team.
Interesting.
Different things cause people to work differently, right? What we do, like if somebody goes on a vacation, we plan a lunch that day, and we say, hey, show us your images and show us, what happened. Tell us the stories during that lunch, and we'll bring lunch in for the team, because it's better to isolate that 1 hour than to allow all these random conversations to happen and destruct everyone's day. Those aren't things that you'd ever see in a definition of Agile, but those are things that you see year after year after year of doing Agile and trying to tweak performance.
One quick question. An ideologist is not going to deal well with a Scrum Master. They are 2 very different people. Would you agree with that? And how does that work its way out in the Agile environment?
Well, I think as long as everybody is kind of committed to the effort itself, they will find ways that you can use the creativity and then the structure and bring those 2 sides of the brain together. So allowing for ideas to propagate during those planning sessions, and then also helping other people come up with this, but then also focused in on committing to at least a short duration to allow us to get some stuff done.
Got it. Back to you.
Cool. So when it comes to tracking ROI, this is one of the areas that we finally have the ability to understand what our team can produce when they are effective and when this process is going. And so imagine being able to walk up to an executive when you're going for more budget for resources, and you say, I need to hire 2 more people, and this is what we will get out of it. And you can almost be certain if you found the right person and they meshed on your team well and you got them up to speed, that your velocity would increase, the cadence would stay the same, and you could produce more content. And we can do that because we learn about our team and the education we need. People start to be cross-functional because we want to get rid of any roadblocks that would ever occur from having an assembly line. The whole reason we talk about Agile today and Lean is because Toyota figured it out in the 50s. They said, look over there in the United States and the way they're producing cars. When the guy who produces wheels runs out of wheels, the factory stops because they have to go and produce wheels and nothing else can go down that line. How can we make sure that we never run out of wheels? And so they adopted the process to allow for this iterative development to occur and change to happen to where they're always working with the volume that they have. And our marketing teams, when the video guy goes on vacation, guess what? We're probably not producing much video that week. So anything that we needed to produce, we can't. The assembly line stops. So our teams need to start learning how to do each other's jobs at a minor versus a major level, and then continue to grow in all these areas. And that allows us to perform better, to have different experiments internally, to get that data we need, and then to just grow. So that's my kind of take on ROI. Andrea, what's yours?
Yeah, I mean, the culture of experimentation, I think, is really important, where you can almost include it on all of your cards or your stories. So what experiment are we running here? What are we trying to learn? What are we hoping that we can change based on the results of releasing this piece of content or sending out this email? We can learn something about our audience's preferences. We can learn something about our team's capabilities. And understanding that not everything's going to work is hard to do, but changing the way that you think about failure, I think, is important there.
Absolutely.
But isn't ROI, in the end of the day, a measure of time it took to do something and the performance or results that you reaped from the activity that you worked on? Doesn't it come down to a return on the investment of the time?
Yeah, I think time and the investment from the company's perspective. And as we see marketing teams kind of pulling out of the agency model and going into the internal team growth period, this is where we have that tracking of time, because it's not just pay money and somebody else comes back with something, right? It's give us money and we have to commit time and resources and then prioritize things. So we need to be able to see that the part that we're building internally is performing at its best, so that way we can focus externally on the return on investments that we're trying to do with the content efforts we're putting out, and then do tweaks to our process internally to best get there. So it's like having a well-oiled machine, so that way we can drive from point A to B well, but if the road starts to change, we need to turn. But as long as we've kept the maintenance on our car, we can get there.
Got it. And I'm going to have you think about a deep question that I don't want you to answer right now, but if Agile Marketing had a mantra, what would the mantra be? But don't answer it right now. We'll save that to the end.
Okay.
Well, I think here we are at the end.
Perfect. All right. We've got some great questions that have come in, and I want to get to all of them. But feel free to go at that question if you want.
Will do.
Here's a question. Can you talk more about the process of forming teams to complete sprints? How that works with content and how you assign points to tasks? That's
a practitioner asking right there.
Thank you for that,
yeah.
Robin.
Yeah,
that was a question.
So estimating is super hard for teams usually, and you kind of have to just start doing it and then get better over time. And I think for content pieces, doing the t-shirt sizing version, so you're doing extra small, medium, large, extra large, can be a good place to start. And then you get the relative sizing. So, an article is probably a small, and then a big ebook that's going to be a piece of gated content, maybe pushing the large or extra large sizing for estimating. And then in terms of making teams, you are probably going to need to find a way to get some sort of visual component for this. So if you don't have a designer on your team and you have to pull somebody in, either outsourced or from another department, then you have to be able to get some kind of time commitment from them so that your team can confidently commit to a deliverable date.
Yeah, for me, I go back to using story points, fictitious days in the estimate. So when I set my team down to estimate, I give them a number, and it's using the planning poker sequence that is out there for Agile, and it has 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 20, 40. And I say, look at this. If we could lock ourselves in this room and not have any distractions, and we could focus all day, and Facebook never popped a notification on us, how long would it take us as a team collectively to build this? And these are the days that we have to represent that. And then if we come up with an 8 and we look at our sprint and we have 20 resource days available, we apply a factor of efficiency. So we bring back in the conversations and back in the meetings and back in the Facebook notifications and say our team is really only effective maybe 6 of the 8 hours a day, so somewhere like a 70%. And so we take that and apply that to the 20, which then gives us a lower number, like a 16, and then we can fit 2 8s in. And so that says we can, commit to saying we can get 16 days worth of work that we planned in this 20-day period.
What's your efficiency ratio? Well, you must be wrong some of the time with your guesses or the quality sacrifices.
Sure, and it usually comes to, I start at 70 and then try to move up or down from there, and I allow for a few sprints to go by. So if we can truly tell, because you can, when people come and report their status on a daily basis, if it was too much for them to handle or if they didn't do a good or accurate job. And if it was really too much for them to handle, then we can say, okay, we need to lower our efficiency factor or re-estimate those items that are too hard to handle. Or we need to continue education. But we always want to make sure that the team commits to doing the work in that time manner. So that way we learn from our mistakes. So we need to come in and finish it up during this 2 weeks. But afterwards, let's re-estimate and think about it again.
Everyone just gets better as time goes on, and it's important to track. So if we estimated that we would do 2 8s in a sprint and we actually only finished 1, then we shouldn't commit to 2 for the next sprint. We should, change the way that we think about how we can estimate.
Are the individuals individually accountable?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you commit the time to it, the team is accountable to complete the work. And so usually you don't fail the sprint. You don't allow for the work not to be done in that time period unless some outside interruption comes in or it's agreed upon that we got way in over our heads and we need to spend a lot of time learning about it before we go into our next one. So like the example Andrea said there, where we took 2 8s on and we only got 1 done. Well, there's a point where we're going to need to re-estimate. So we need to spend some time learning about this.
Question from Ryan. Would love to learn more about your tool recommendations if you have 150 products and 30 people in an agency. And by the way, I noticed you didn't mention Basecamp. You mentioned Trello and Rike, Workfront.
Sure, there's a lot of project management tools, but one that we use a lot too is called Team Foundation Server from Microsoft, or Visual Studio Online now. I mean, it's a great Agile tool. The problem is it's so tied to software that it becomes very structured around software. And then some of the other tools, they don't necessarily fit into a particular Agile mold like Kanban or Scrum. They're more free-flowing, and so it's harder for teams to get in those and find examples on how to do it, where these other tools you can reach out to people who are doing marketing with those tools really well. But what was the main question?
Would love to learn about tool recommendations if you have 150 projects and 30 people in an agency.
Yeah, you got a big chore. One, it sounds like there's way more projects than people, so people are moving around during the day. Using an approach like Kanban would make a lot more sense for those situations to where it's hard for you to commit to a particular increment of time, but you still want to commit to doing work. And so Kanban removes those weak commitments from the process, and it just gives you a board that only allows for a certain number of items to live in each column before you have to move them through the process. So it ensures you keep being productive, but it doesn't give you that committed time frame, which a lot of people can't do because of these situations, right? They don't have time to say, I can commit to this because I work on 80 different projects at the same time. The problem is, he mentioned the word agency, and at some point your customer is going to want to know when it's done and how long it's going to take, and so those two things bring back the sprint into the equation. So it may be your agency needs to consider taking on the larger projects and start to isolate the number of projects for people, or start buying some more agencies.
Ryan, with a follow-up, what is the number of projects that is too much to handle via Agile? Sounds great for a small number of projects, but I've been unable to find anything about large-scale applications.
Sure. So if you look at Microsoft, they're a great example. Every project internally is ran on an Agile team. So every little component inside Windows, and they dog food their own systems to do that. So I don't know if there's a scale problem with when Agile starts to break. It's more of the buy-in and the leadership model that you then have to go in and start to be Agile in the way you produce the concepts of your products and you measure your products. But Andrea's got a great example because they do tons of stuff in their organization.
Yeah, we're not running it quite that scale, but there are, I know we're running out of time, but I would recommend that, I think it's Ryan that's asking, that you take a look into SAFe, the Scaled Agile Framework, which is made to spread this out over large teams, and then you get teams of teams working, and there are people doing it. It gets complicated and requires, like Jeff said, a considerable amount of executive buy-in, because you're going to have to do a lot of cross-planning and scrum of scrums, and things can get hairy, but it's absolutely doable.
Yeah.
Good news here. Kristen asks, when and where is this workshop mentioned? I'll answer that for you guys. Both Jeff and Andrew will be running a workshop at contentmarketingconference.com, which you can go to contentmarketingconference.com to learn more about it. It's a fabulous half-day workshop. Let's see, another one. Someone had a question. What was the source for the statistics and percentages on the enhanced productivity using Agile? Somebody like that data. Do you remember that data on that slide?
The Agile is from chiefmartech.com. That was from people who had adopted Agile methodologies 10 years, so 10 years after the original Agile manifesto came out. They polled the people who had adopted it and asked the benefits that they got. So yeah, chiefmartech.com is where that study was reported.
Got it. Let's see. I think we answered that one. I think we've answered most of the questions, guys. Of course, I have 100 more, but but I'll save those for post-workshop, and you'll have to endure more firing questions at some point in your journey with us, I'm afraid. But I guess a lot of people in general, as we're concluding, as we look at the broad scale of this, there are a lot of people listening in that are new to Agile. I'm certain of it, myself included, by the way. But do you think, in the end of the day, it's a better team-spirited way to do business? I know that sounds like an odd question, but are people happier in an Agile environment? Do they feel more productive? Do they feel more team-centered? Is it a better spirit?
Absolutely. Yeah. You get so much more ownership over how you spend your day as an individual contributor, and it does foster more team unity because you want to see the sprint succeed and jump in and help other people on your team. And as a content marketer, it has saved my sanity more than once, and I think it's going to be the only way to do marketing in the next 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the book I just released on Agile Marketing, you can grab it on Amazon if you would like. I wrote that with a backlog, and I wrote that as an individual person writing a book. I didn't have a co-author. I didn't have a publisher. And so I use the Agile principles to keep the sanity, right? To say, here's where I'm going. Things are going to change over time. I'm going to learn more about the way people are adopting this so I can dig deeper the further I get into the book. And it just gave me that piece to say, look, here's the schedule I'm going to commit to, and things are going to change, but I'm going to continue to go. And I think the big winner in all of this is your audience and the people you are creating the content for, because it's going to be more centered around them and a team that's focused on learning more about the customer to produce high-value content, which is where content marketing goes, can actually do that if the process is centered around their satisfaction.
Terrific. Andrea, I wanted to thank you. Do you want to chime in anything else on that particular section, or are you good?
No, I think I'm good.
Good. Andrea, fantastic. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you for having us, Byron.
Right on.
Yeah, thank you.
Jeff, right on. Thanks, guys. Appreciate everyone being here today. It was great, great insights into something that's seemingly critically important for where we're all going. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next month on the monthly webinar. Thanks for tuning in.